Apple is down almost 4% this morning after dropping a similar amount yesterday, and that is affecting all tech. We'll take a hard look at the UAW, big issue there, and China, holy mackerel, both of which are having an impact on Tesla. But what about Tesla's own bad headlines? We'll cover those as well. By the way, this is Randy Kirk. Hit like, hit subscribe. You want to hit notify. We have Brian White later today. We did one of our most fun interviews ever, and informative too. I mean, it's extremely valuable stuff, of course. But Brian does bring a bit of levity, and so that might just cheer you up later in the day. Hit notify. I mean, also we want to talk about Patreon. Thank you again. Multiple people joining Patreon this week, sometimes because they want one of these. In fact, we had our biggest sales day ever yesterday by a lot. So folks are figuring it out that they really want one of those. We'll talk more about that later. All right. When there is no good news and precious little news of any kind, there's a human inclination to concentrate on the negative. China, Eurozone recessions, those are on the list, as is the possibility of a UAW strike and or the reality of some significant pay increases for union workers in the automobile industry, even if there is no strike. I mean, there's going to be some kind of an increase. The question is, can the automakers absorb those increases truly in the future, or will these be a real issue going downstream? Have you ever watched, these airline startups? I know this sounds like I'm way off into another world right now, but it's really, really relevant here. You have an airline startup come in like Hawaiian Airlines, or years ago it was JetBlue, or, pick the airline that starts up, and these come in and they just grow like crazy, and they can offer lower fares or other advantages that the legacy airlines can't. Well, one of the reasons for that is that they have all kinds of legacy costs that they can't get rid of. They have legacy pensions. They have legacy union issues. They have old stock, old airline, old equipment, okay, where the new companies have brand new equipment that's more efficient. So these are all issues that do add into why these new companies have an advantage. So we have the same thing with Ford, GM, Stellantis. We've seen the problem before as the Japanese, South Korean, and German car companies open plants in the United States, and they didn't have unions. They still don't have unions. The only unionized car assembly or manufacturing companies in the United States are still Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis. And so, when these companies from outside the country came in, they also weren't faced with having old equipment, old manufacturing facilities, et cetera. They could be way more efficient. So, but these auto companies have never seen anything as significant as what's happening with Tesla at this point. So there's a bunch of articles that have been taking a look at the possible impact of a major strike by the UAW against all three so-called legacy automakers. Stellantis, of course, is no longer a U.S. company. It's a French corporation, or maybe it's an Italian corporation. It's headquartered in Amsterdam. I'm not sure what they qualify as now. But anyway, most of the articles are pointing to three major consequences facing the big three. One, further increases in labor costs in comparison to competitors, especially Tesla. This is going to be massive. No way is Tesla going to have to raise their labor costs as much as the unions, even if the unions get the bare minimum that they're hoping for. Number two, greater difficulty in making the transition to EV when you've got union rules and union situations that are going to, and old legacy thinking. Number three, major potential losses if there's a prolonged strike. These are losses that impact the union members, but they impact the companies and they impact the entire economy. Anyway, so this issue bears very close watching over the next weeks. President Biden is a very serious fan of these companies, and some speculate that he will somehow play a role. I'm not sure what that might look like. And the strike could begin as early as a week from today, the day after the Detroit Auto Show starts, which gives an opportunity for the unions to create activity and PR around the show because there's so much attention on that major show. So there's some reporting yesterday. I saw last night, did a bunch of research indicating that offers and counteroffers are moving back and forth at a pretty good clip between the automakers and the UAW. But these things are rarely decided until the last possible minute. You know this. Okay, sometimes they're even extended. That, I think, is a real possibility this time. I can see the union figuring that they have an opportunity to leverage that Detroit Auto Show. And so I could see them saying, well, okay, we'll give you a few more days to think. Anyway, we'll see what is happening. Big thing that's been coming up and coming up and coming up. I did mention it yesterday. I want to mention it again. Corporations are competing with the governments and the banks for cash. Money is still going to safety with great returns, better returns on bonds, and even whether government bonds, utility bonds, corporate bonds, bank, money market certificates and CDs. So there's a lot of folks that are competing now over all of those different cash or cash equivalent types of items, and that's drawing money out of equities. Now, there is a lot of money. So it may be that this long term will not matter, but in the short term, we're seeing this, and there's in fact there's been more bond issuance, more corporate bond issues than expected this week and last week, and people are seeing that this is going to also be a problem for these corporations because they're having to renew their bonds at much higher interest rates. Utility stocks are down sharply. Truflation this morning is showing a slight down this morning, 2.66. Thing I'd like about this data is there's been a consistency in this range over a very long time. The CSI, PPI, and PCE data has also been consistent for many, many months on a month-over-month basis, but they've been slightly higher year over year because of, we've talked about this a bunch of times because of housing primarily. So this is looking good in terms of what we could see coming up next week on CPI and PPI, and then a few weeks later on PCE. Well, it turns out that the Biden administration has been working on a deal with the Saudis. I guess I didn't know this until this morning. This deal would include, it doesn't necessarily include anything with regard to oil. It's about normalization of relationships with Israel. It's about Saudi security, even helping Saudi with their nuclear program. Based on the research that I just did, there's no telling whether there's a deal that's anywhere close to reality, but there are high-level negotiations taking place right as we speak. There's a big meeting later this week or early next week. Anyway, but in the meantime, the price of oil keeps going up, and nobody knows whether this is even on the table, whether the oil issue is even on the table. So Tesla almost has to go up in the next weeks. Almost has to. We all know that Tesla is sometimes contrary to what our expectations. But at some point, we're going to get the numbers on Highland purchases. I don't know why we haven't seen some numbers on those yet. I'm expecting those to be very good numbers out of China as well as Europe. We're already hearing of longer wait times on Model Y in China and Model X in the United States. We will have a Cybertruck announcement someday soon. I'm hoping by Monday. It is pretty likely we will have a Highland announcement for the US. I'm hoping by Monday. Again, I said it last night. Let me say it again. I'm hoping that Tesla's PR department, oh yeah, they don't have one. I'm hoping someone at Tesla will say the perfect time to have the Highland US announcement and the CT announcement would be on Monday of next week, 2 days before the beginning of the show, so that you keep that stuff in the headlines through the entire week. Anyway, we'll get some kind of response from Tesla or third parties. I'm expecting to offset the negative news on Gigamex and Cybertruck stalling. I'll talk about that later in just a second. On the other side of the coin, there are some bearish signals regarding third quarter production and shipping numbers for Tesla, and I'm starting to be a little bit of one of those bears myself. I said months ago that Tesla might limit how they are increasing the ramps at Austin and at Berlin rather than just keep dropping prices. I know they said, we're going to be pedal to the metal. We're going to ramp as fast as we possibly can. We're going to sell as many units as we possibly can, even if we have to lower prices. You know, there's a balance there. You might get to 2 shifts. I think this might be the situation in Berlin. You get to 2 shifts and you have to make the decision. You have to balance. Do we add a 3rd shift, even though it means we may have to lower prices, or are we better off to stay at 2 shifts for a while? Same thing at Austin. I think they have 3 of their 5 lines operating or something like that. I could be off on that, but they have lines that they have not started operating. Could it be possible that it doesn't make sense to put on that additional production if they think they'll have to lower prices in order to sell those units? So these are some of the trade-offs I think that are taking place. This is something I've been talking about for months. So it's not new, but it might mean that we're going to get some lower numbers, both in terms of production and shipping on the 3rd quarter than we have been expecting. Now, what that also will mean, though, and I really think this is true, I think we're going to see much higher margins than a lot of people think are going to happen. All right, this morning, initial claims for unemployment decreased by 13,000 to 216,000. The median forecast in the Bloomberg survey was 233,000, so 17,000 less than expected. This is, of course, good news for the economy, but there's starting to be some nervousness about whether the Fed will increase what would be called, I guess, one more and done in November. The number there is increasing, is now over 50% of the people that they survey think there will be one more increase. And of course, that is putting pressure on all markets. And, you know, that's what part of what you're seeing this morning on the NASDAQ. Treasuries will also, this is what I said earlier, there's 30 companies have come to the U.S. primary market for bonds in the last 2 days, much higher than what was expected. I wanted to let you know that. Okay, SpaceX news. I know I don't normally report SpaceX news, but, you know, it impacts the overall perception of Elon Musk and of Tesla. So the StarShip launch is also right at the top of my list of things that I consider to be the most important things that have happened in this very new century. So Musk said he thought StarShip would be ready to launch maybe even this week, maybe the 8th, just waiting for FAA licensing approval. But the FAA on Wednesday said it's still investigating the whole issue with regard to the last launch and some of the problems that were caused and whether SpaceX has implemented all the corrective actions from that mishap. So I don't think we're going to see a launch on the 8th. They didn't give any indication of how long that might put off the launch, but just to let you know, that is the current situation. Now, here is we have a guy on. There's several people on X, formerly known as Twitter, who like to point out all the negatives and fly for dat. Fly for dat. I'm sure there must be some meaning to that. Fly the number 4 dat. He has a list of horror out this morning. I want to respond to it. He says, number 1, no gig in Mexico until at least 2026. As I've mentioned a couple of different times, I think this is completely false news. I'd love for Tesla to speak to it. If it is true that there's some reason why we can't have a Tesla plant opening until 2026, then I think Tesla would rapidly shift to the India idea, or maybe to another giga location yet unnamed, because I know they've got a lot of them in play. So I don't think this is any chance that this is true. So just to let you know. Number 2, Giga Texas sharply slowing production. No, they didn't sharply slow production. What they did is that they have reduced production for a couple of days, or completely shut down for a couple of days. I don't know exactly how many days, in order to upgrade the plant. I do think, as I mentioned above, that they have slowed the ramp and kept production about at the same levels as they were even maybe in the first quarter. Maybe no increase compared to the first quarter at this point. Yet, the third one on his list is U.S. Model Y inventory at record highs. Even with discounts, we're actually seeing in China, we're seeing increased days to ship by a lot, especially on performance. I don't think we'll see increased. I think we'll see all of the inventory move out just fine in the United States, unless we get that Osborne effect, which could happen. All right. And then he says China weekly number came in weak. You never know. That was, China sales in China. So this very likely is a time when there was a substantial number of exports, but we'll have to see what happens. We'll know that in about 2.5, 3 weeks. We'll hear the overall totals for the quarter. Europe, he says, can't grow despite lowest prices ever. Europe has been actually doing quite nice, not as nice, again, as I expected, or probably you expected, and that could be why we're not seeing the growth of the Berlin factory at the numbers that we were hoping for. Anyway, the worst news of today is that the six of the Fed presidents will be speaking. That's never good. And so we'll see how that works out. So Apple is leading the NASDAQ down with a massive 5% drop based on issues with China banning iPhones. Just one more China issue to make things interesting. Tesla is down was about 2 times. Let's take a look. Actually, let's look at what the realities are as opposed to what I wrote 25 minutes ago, because you know how fast things can change. So we now have Tesla down 2.64. That's just about double the NASDAQ, which is down 1.5, not even double. So that's kind of normal for Tesla. Apple down 3.73 this morning, and all but Meta are down in terms of the major tech stocks. Nvidia down 3% as well. All of the Cathie Wood stocks are down. The Dow Jones is up slightly, $3.92, with the NASDAQ down 204, S&P down 30. Now let's look at the other numbers to round out the morning. We have got the Bitcoin down again, running about 25.6 right now. We've got the dollar high. As you can imagine, the dollar is going to stay high for a while. We've got gold down again. I'm expecting that because the dollar goes up, the gold goes down. Oil is down a little bit, but the Brent is still over 90, and the Texas Intermediate is still over 87. So that's really bad news, and that's expected to go higher, as I've mentioned. Bonds down a teeny bit, but still 4.284, pushing that 4.3 number that we talked about yesterday. The 2-month is unchanged. The 2-year is also down just a tad, but still over 5. Well, there you have it. Not exactly very good news this morning, but I'm saying that Tesla will not finish at these levels. Tesla will move back up just like it did yesterday. Really down bad in the morning off of what I'm calling a no news except some bad news day. And then it'll slowly move back up during the day. I think that'll happen again like it did yesterday. All right, $25. Everybody says these should be at 40. I'm thinking of when we put it up on Amazon, I'm thinking of putting it at 30 or $29.95. You want to get yours at $25 from me direct right away. It is a magnet. It is a bottle opener. It can go everywhere. You should have one everywhere that you have any kind of beer or something in a bottle that needs to be opened. You should have them around just to show your friends, and you should give them to your friends. You should give them to your coworkers. You should give them to your boss, your brother, everybody. You should have one at a cabin. You should have one in your RV. I've had multiple people. In fact, yesterday was a huge day. Oh my goodness, we sold so many of these yesterday. It was by far the biggest day, and it's been great. I mean, the numbers are at least what I was hoping for, and maybe better. Some people say they're buying them just to support the channel. That's fine. Come on now. You're buying it because you want it, and thank you for helping to support the channel. Anyway, $25. The information is down below. You're just sending the money to my PayPal. You can also get one. You can get one, not only that plain one, I call it the plain one. It's not very plain. There's also the camo version, and both of them come in this beautiful gift box with a nice magnetic close. So that makes a great gift that you can give away. Get one for free if you join Patreon at the $10 level. All right, I think we've done all the damage we can do for today. Support the channel in any way that you can, even by hitting like, subscribe, notify, and you want to be notified because Brian's going to be on later today. It's been great talking to you.